On my birthday, my sons hosted a dinner, and my daughter-in-law announced, "This is your last holiday at home. Soon you'll be moving to a nursing facility." I answered coldly, "Then this is your last night under my roof." Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. The moment still slices through me like glass. Jade's voice, bright and cruel, rising above the hum of clinking forks and muted conversations at harbor and hearth. "This is your last birthday at home. Soon you'll be in a care facility." Care facility. The words dripped from her lips like acid disguised as honey. I watched her as she said it, Jade with her perfect red dress hugging every curve, her manicured hands stroking the stem of her wineglass as if it were a trophy she had already won. My daughter-in-law. My intruder. The woman who had convinced my eldest son that I was nothing more than a burden to be moved out of sight. Ryan, my firstborn, nodded firmly as though this decision had already been written into law. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Lucas, my younger son, stared at the flickering candle in front of him, pretending to study the flame, too cowardly to look me in the eye. I placed my glass down with deliberate slowness. My hand did not shake. My voice did not waver. "Then this," I said, each word crisp, cold as the steel edge of a knife, "is your last night under my roof." The silence was instant. Even the waiter, mid-step with a tray of roasted salmon, paused at the edge of the room. Every diner nearby went quiet, ears turning, pretending not to listen but unable to ignore the sound of a mother cutting her sons off at the knees. Jade blinked once, and in that flicker of a second, her smirk faltered. But she recovered quickly, tilting her head like one might to a confused elderly woman, offering a pitying smile that was more insulting than a slap. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, but his agreement with Jade was already etched into his expression. Lucas swallowed hard, still refusing to meet my eyes. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, making him look more like a boy again than the man he was supposed to be. The restaurant had always been a place of warmth for me. Harbor and hearth, with its soft amber glow, rustic beams, and view of the river glimmering just outside the window, had been the setting of family milestones. Robert, my late husband, used to bring me here on anniversaries, sometimes surprising me with roses on the table before I even sat down. Birthdays, graduations, even the night Ryan got accepted into university, this place had witnessed joy. But tonight it bore witness to betrayal. The food arrived, though no one spoke. The salmon turned cold on my plate. I moved the asparagus around with my fork, not from lack of appetite but from the nausea curling in my chest. The silence was not silence at all. It was suffocating, filled with unsaid words, with the memory of every sacrifice I had made that none of them seemed to remember. I thought of the nights when Robert and I had been newly married, counting coins at the kitchen table, deciding whether to pay the heating bill or buy new shoes for Ryan. I thought of the years after Robert died, when I worked double shifts at the library to keep the mortgage paid. When Lucas would come home with holes in his jeans and I stitched them by candlelight because buying new ones wasn't an option. They never saw the hours I spent awake, balancing checkbooks, negotiating with banks, cutting coupons, selling heirlooms piece by piece to cover tuition fees. They saw only the result. A warm home, food always on the table, the illusion of stability. They never saw the blood I traded for their comfort. And now Jade, radiant, smug Jade, looked at me as if I were an object to be moved, an inconvenience to be managed, a problem to be solved. When dessert menus were offered, none of us took one. The night had already ended. We left with the river glinting under the streetlights outside. Each step to the car heavier than the last. Ryan walked Jade to their sedan, his hand resting on her lower back protectively, as though she were the one who had been wounded tonight. Lucas offered me no words, just a quick hug that felt obligatory, like one given to a distant aunt. I drove home alone. When I opened the front door, the air of my house wrapped around me with its familiar stillness. Robert's keepsakes greeted me immediately, the watch he left on the mantel, the fountain pen he had cherished, the wedding photo framed in oak where his eyes seemed to follow me across the room. This house had been filled with love once. Now it stood as a reminder that love can curdle into expectation, that family can twist into chains. I walked into the living room and sat in Robert's chair. The cushion still carried the faint shape of his body, though he had been gone for 15 years. I touched the armrest as though he were there, listening. You'd have hated this, Robert, I whispered into the still air. You'd have hated to see what we raised. I thought back to when Ryan was born. The way Robert had held him, marveling at his tiny fingers, swearing that we would give him everything. We did. Every ounce of strength, every dollar, every dream we shelved. And Lucas, arriving 2 years later, my gentle boy, always quieter, always more hesitant, who grew into a man who avoided confrontation even when it mattered. I had believed that sacrifice would be remembered, that loyalty would breed loyalty, that children raised in love would return love when the time came. But I had miscalculated. Because tonight in that restaurant I saw the truth. My children had learned entitlement, not gratitude. Dependency, not duty. And Jade was their teacher now. The rage was not fire but ice. It moved through me slowly, numbing, clarifying. They thought I was weak. They thought I was old enough to be dismissed, fragile enough to be relocated, harmless enough to manipulate. But they had forgotten one thing. Everything they lived in, everything they relied on, every bill they never paid belonged to me. I picked up the phone, my fingers steady as I dialed Daniel Price. My late husband's attorney, a man I hadn't spoken to in years but trusted. He answered after 2 rings, his voice brisk, professional. Daniel, it's Nora. There was a pause, a shift in tone. Nora, it's been a long time. I need to see you tomorrow morning, I said. No delays. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He had known me long enough to recognize steel when he heard it. After hanging up, I leaned back in Robert's chair. Around me, the house hummed with history. The photographs of the boys as children stared down at me from the walls, smiling faces frozen in time, innocent of the future. On the bookshelf, Robert's war medals gleamed faintly under the lamplight. A reminder of battles fought and won. This would be another battle. And tomorrow, my sons would learn what Jade had failed to understand. I am not helpless. I am not disposable. I am the owner. And I hold the power to end their little games. Saturday morning broke gray and damp, the kind of weather that usually made me want to pull the curtains shut and stay wrapped in blankets. But not that day. That morning, resolve was the only thing warming me. I arrived at Daniel Price's office promptly at 9. The waiting room smelled of lemon polish and fresh paper, lined with framed diplomas and old law books whose spines carried the weight of 100 forgotten disputes. I didn't sit. I couldn't. My body hummed with a restless energy, the kind that comes when fury meets clarity. Daniel opened his office door. His hair was grayer now, his shoulders heavier, but his eyes were still sharp. He gestured me inside without a word, as if he already knew this meeting was not about nostalgia. When I stepped into his office, he closed the door and set down a thick folder on his polished oak desk. I took the liberty of pulling your files from the last estate review, he said. His tone was careful, like a surgeon preparing a scalpel. He spread the documents across the desk, and there, in neat legal language, lay the truth of my years of sacrifice. The Cedar Lane house where Ryan and Jade lived, parading as homeowners, was mine. I had paid off their mortgage 3 years ago after Ryan's business failed, and Jade cried about starting fresh. The deed bore only my name. Next came Lucas's property. His auto garage stood on land I had purchased, believing that giving him ownership of the space would finally stabilize his half-hearted ventures. But instead of thriving, it became a pit of debts I quietly filled, writing checks under the pretense of loans that were never repaid. Then Daniel turned a page and my breath caught. The very restaurant where Jade had announced my exile, Harbor and Hearth, it was mine too. I had invested in it decades earlier, helping an old friend open the place when no bank would take a chance. That friend had long since passed, but my ownership remained, quietly collecting revenue that I funneled, foolishly, into keeping my children afloat. Daniel's finger tapped the deeds one by one. Nora, you hold the strings. They've been living in castles you built with your bare hands. You own every wall they lean against. For years I had kept quiet about it. I didn't want my sons to feel inadequate, didn't want them to think their successes were false. I thought silence was protection. I thought providing quietly was love. But silence had become a weapon in their hands. They think I'm weak, I said slowly, scanning the papers. But it's all mine. Daniel slid a new set of documents toward me. Eviction notices, utility cancellation forms, legal drafts for halting the automatic payments I had set up long ago. He had even prepared a section citing irreparable disrespect as grounds for immediate termination of tenancy. I read every word. The letters blurred sometimes, not from age but from the weight of years pressed into ink. The memories flickered behind each line. Ryan and Jade begging me to co-sign their mortgage, Lucas confessing his loans had piled up, my quiet decision to sacrifice another portion of my savings instead of letting them fail. You've covered their electricity, gas, even their grocery deliveries, Daniel reminded me, tapping the stack of receipts I had brought in. All automatic. All on your account. I nodded, bitterness curling at the corners of my mouth. I know. Every time the lights stayed on in their homes, it was because I let mine flicker. Daniel handed me a pen. Its weight in my hand was heavier than I expected. I thought of Robert then. His long hours at the factory, his quiet pride in paying each bill on time, his faith that we were raising sons who would understand sacrifice. I signed. One document, then another, each signature like the swing of an axe through dead wood. By the last page my hand ached, but my chest felt strangely light. Daniel collected the papers carefully, stacking them with the precision of a man who knew these pages were no longer just documents, they were weapons. I'll file everything Monday morning. But we don't wait for whispers anymore. Tonight, every relative will receive copies of these deeds and bank statements. The truth will be out in the open. First I hesitated. Exposing family matters to relatives felt like airing laundry in the town square. For years I had protected my children from shame, covered for them when gossip circled. I told neighbors Ryan's business was growing steadily, when in reality it was sinking. I told relatives Lucas's garage was busy with orders, when I was the one paying his suppliers. But what had my protection given me? Humiliation. Manipulation. The cruelty of being told I no longer had a place in my own home. So I nodded. Send everything. Let them choke on the truth. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of stamped envelopes, each filled with copies of deeds, receipts, bank records. All proof that for years I had been the silent engine behind my sons' lives. I licked each envelope shut, my mouth tasting of paper and resolve. I imagined the relatives opening them, the aunts who whispered about my supposed forgetfulness, the cousins who believed Ryan's lies about funding his success, the neighbors who thought Jade was the pillar of the household. Now they would all see the truth, black and white, signed and notarized. No more gossip. No more smirks behind my back. The facts would speak. When the last envelope was sealed, I leaned back in Robert's chair. Outside, the rain tapped against the window, steady and patient, like applause from the night itself. For the first time in years, I wasn't trembling over whether my sons could pay their bills. I wasn't calculating how much of my retirement would disappear next month. I was finished being their silent benefactor. Tomorrow the world would know. I wasn't some fragile old woman waiting to be tucked away in a facility. I was the owner. And owners do not beg for respect. They demand it. The call to Ryan was short, my voice clipped and sharp. Meet me. Alone. Tomorrow at noon. My house. He tried to ask why, but I hung up. Some conversations deserve no explanation in advance. By the time he arrived, I had already spread the paperwork across the dining table. Deeds, receipts, statements, all lined up like soldiers ready for war. The house was quiet except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Each swing of its pendulum a reminder that time does not stop. Not for grief, not for betrayal. When Ryan walked in, he looked like a man coming to lecture, not to listen. His stride was heavy with the confidence of someone who thought the verdict had already been decided. Jade's voice still clung to him. I could almost hear her in the way he straightened his shoulders, in the smug tilt of his chin. Mom, he began, using the tone reserved for softening blows. About what Jade said at the restaurant, you have to understand. It's time we think about your future. About safety. About care. I raised one hand, silencing him. My voice was cold steel. Sit down. He hesitated but obeyed, lowering himself into the chair across from me. For a moment I saw the boy he once was, the child who used to scramble into Robert's lap, the teenager who came home late smelling of beer but still kissed my cheek. Then I saw Jade's shadow in his face, her words shaping his mouth. I pushed the stack of papers toward him. Read. Confusion flickered across his face. He picked up the first sheet, eyes scanning. His posture stiffened as recognition settled in. The Cedar Lane deed, bold and undeniable with my name, not his, etched in legal ink. This isn't right, he muttered, flipping to the next page, then the next. Utility bills paid by my account. Transfer receipts. Mortgage payoff confirmations. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Finally, his voice cracked into a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. Because I thought I still had a son, not a tenant. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the steady tick of the clock. His face paled, the bravado draining like sand through a sieve. Mom, He searched for words, eyes darting across the table as though the papers might rearrange themselves into a kinder truth. I thought, Jade said. I cut him off. Jade said. Always Jade said. When was the last time you came here without her? When was the last time you visited without asking for money? His mouth opened, then closed again. The silence answered for him. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp as a blade. You've lived in my house for years. You've let me pay your bills, your mortgage, even your groceries. And you thought you had the right to discuss where I'll live? You thought you could sentence me to a facility while sitting in property you don't even own? His face crumpled with shame, but shame was not enough. Not anymore. The eviction stands, I said, sliding the signed notice across the table. You and Jade have 30 days. Utilities will be cut sooner. I'm done funding your life. Ryan's hands trembled as he gripped the paper, his eyes searching mine for softness, for the mother who used to rescue him from every mistake. But she was gone. Mom, please, he whispered. It's not what you think. I just wanted stability. For Jade. For us. Stability. My laugh was hoarse, bitter. Stability bought with my exhaustion, my savings, my silence. That's not stability. It's theft dressed as love. His shoulders sagged. So that's it? After everything? Yes, I snapped. After everything. Because everything has been me. My labor. My sacrifice. My money. And what have I received? Lies. Manipulation. Public humiliation. His face twisted, torn between anger and guilt. For a second I thought he might shout, but instead he slumped back in his chair, defeated. I stood, gathering the rest of the papers into a neat stack. I'll give you this much. You're not alone. Lucas is finished too. No more funding for his garage, no more quiet bailouts. I've been paying for everyone's failures as if they were mine. No more. Ryan looked up sharply. You told Lucas? He'll find out today, I said evenly. His notice is already drafted. He will stand on his own 2 feet or he will fall. Either way, he won't take me with him. The words hung between us, final and irrevocable. For the first time in years I felt the tightness in my chest loosen. A breath of relief filling the hollow space betrayal had carved. Ryan tried once more, his voice breaking. Mom, please don't do this. Jade, she's under pressure. She just wants. She wants comfort without cost. And she's trained you to believe it's love. My voice cracked, but I didn't falter. But love doesn't pawn heirlooms. Love doesn't plan your mother's removal over dinner. His eyes dropped, the fight gone. He stared at the notice in his hand like it was a foreign language, like he couldn't comprehend that the ground beneath his feet was shifting for good. I moved to the doorway, hand on the frame. The door will lock behind you when you leave. And Ryan? He lifted his head slowly, hope flickering like the last ember of a dying fire. I still love you, I said quietly. But I will not let love be a leash around my neck. Not anymore. The clock struck 1 as he left, the chime echoing through the hollow of the house. I stood alone, surrounded by Robert's keepsakes, by the walls I had built with decades of sacrifice. For the first time in years I felt something close to freedom. No more secret bailouts. No more excuses. And if my sons wanted to see me as nothing more than a burden, then let them face life without the woman who carried theirs for so long. By Sunday morning the war had already begun. The phone rang before breakfast and again after and then again at noon. Each time I let it go to voicemail. My cousins, my sister-in-law, neighbors, all carrying the same poison whisper. Nora's losing her memory. It spread like mold in damp corners, slow at first, then impossible to contain. She's confused, they said. She's making rash decisions. Jade had planted the seed and now everyone was watering it. 3 p.m. The doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a man in a white coat stood there, clipboard in hand, his smile stretched too wide. "Mrs. Keene?" he asked politely. "I'm Dr. Halvorsen. I've been asked to conduct a geriatric wellness check." I stared at him. The coat was clean but too crisp, the stethoscope hanging around his neck like a prop. His shoes were polished, his cologne sharp. No doctor I ever trusted smelled like that. "By whom?" I asked flatly. "Your family." Out of concern. I almost laughed in his face. Concern? These were the same people who had dined on my money for years, who had nodded along while Jade plotted my exile. And now they were sending strangers to my doorstep, hoping to manufacture proof of my decline. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I lifted my phone, pressed record, and held it up for him to see. His smile faltered. "I have not requested your presence," I said, my tone sharp as broken glass. "You will leave my property immediately. Any further visits without legal order will be reported as harassment." His face flushed, but he nodded and walked quickly back to his car. I saved the recording, labeling it carefully. Uninvited doctor visit, February 11th, 3:07 p.m. Evidence. That evening, I sat at the dining table again, but not with deeds this time, with doctor's appointments. If Jade wanted to weaponize my age, then I would arm myself with proof. I called Dr. Patel, my longtime physician, and scheduled a full evaluation. Then another with a neurologist. Then another with a psychiatrist. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I knew the value of paper in a courtroom. Let Jade spread rumors. I would spread documents. By midnight, I had already scanned receipts and copies of transfers. Money Jade had funneled into vacations under the guise of household bills. Flights to Cabo. Spa weekends. Designer bags. I highlighted the transactions one by one, attaching screenshots of her smiling selfies from those very trips. I created folders, one physical, one digital, labeled dated undeniable. If my family wanted to claim senility, then let them explain how a confused old woman managed to build a case file that could sink them all. On Monday morning, Daniel filed for a restraining order. "Jade has escalated to psychological harassment," he said grimly. "We'll stop her from approaching you. And we'll make sure the family sees the truth before her lies can harden." But Jade wasn't done. By Sunday night, my phone lit up with notifications. On Instagram, on Facebook, there she was. Red eyes. Tear-streaked cheeks. Speaking into a camera as if the world were her jury. "I don't know what's happening to Nora," she said in a trembling voice. "She's always been like a mother to me. But lately, she's not herself. She's pushing us away, cutting us off, making reckless choices. We're so worried about her. We just want her safe." Her crocodile tears glistened under ring light. Behind her, the house I had paid for stood in the background, tidy and warm, as though she had built it with her bare hands. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I didn't defend myself in the shallow court of social media. I simply pressed save and added the video to my folder. Evidence. The truth doesn't need hashtags. The next morning, I printed every deed, every receipt, every photo of Jade's extravagant spending. I made packets and mailed them to my relatives, uncut, unfiltered, undeniable. By Tuesday, the phones fell quieter. People who had called me confused were suddenly silent. Because now they knew. The Cedar Lane house wasn't Ryan's, it was mine. The restaurant wasn't theirs to boast about, it was mine. The garage land wasn't Lucas's pride, it was mine. Facts speak louder than sobs. But Jade's fight grew desperate. On Wednesday, she showed up at the edge of my property, screaming from the sidewalk. "You can't do this, Nora. You're sick, you need help." Her voice carried through the neighborhood, loud enough to attract stares. I stood at my doorway, calm, my phone in hand, recording every second. "Leave or I will call the police," I said evenly. She screamed louder, tears smearing her mascara. "You'll regret this. You'll end up alone." When the patrol car finally pulled up, the officer didn't need explanation. He escorted her away, her shouts echoing down the street. That night, Daniel called. "Good news. The temporary restraining order is approved. She can't step foot on your property again. For the first time in weeks I slept deeply. Not peacefully. Peace was still far away, but solidly like a soldier resting between battles. Still, the air in the house was heavy with memory. Robert's watch ticked faintly in its glass case. His photograph stared at me from the mantel as if to ask, "Is this what we raised? Is this what loyalty became?" I answered him in silence. No more whispers. No more manipulations. No more pretending I was fragile while they fed on the marrow of my life. They thought they had cornered me with gossip, but I had turned their smear into evidence. And now, every rumor was just another nail in the coffin of their own credibility. The knock came at 9 sharp. 3 hard raps that echoed through the house like a judge's gavel. When I opened the door, the sheriff stood there, his uniform crisp, a stack of envelopes in his hand. "Mrs. Keene?" he asked, his voice neutral but steady. "Yes." He handed me the papers. Service of eviction notices. Delivery confirmed. I nodded, thanked him, and watched as he walked back to his patrol car. The papers felt heavier than their weight. Ink and signature carrying years of sacrifice, betrayal, and now justice. By noon, the phone was vibrating nonstop. Ryan's voice cracked through voicemail after voicemail. "Mom, what are you doing? You can't just throw us out, this isn't right. Call me back, please." Then a second louder. "You're making a mistake. Jade's crying, she doesn't know what to do. Please let's talk." And finally the inevitable rage. "You think you can embarrass us like this? We'll fight you. You won't win." I let each one play without lifting the phone. That evening I sat at the kitchen table, tea cooling beside me. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. And then I noticed the safe. It sat in the corner of the study, small, black, a box of memory and history. I opened it with the combination I had memorized 20 years ago. The door swung open with a faint squeak. Inside were Robert's coin collection, polished and catalogued, and my mother's jewelry, rings, necklaces, pearls from another era. I had looked at them last week, certain they were secure. But now emptiness. The trays were bare. Only a velvet pouch lay crumpled at the bottom. Its drawstring snapped. I stood frozen, the realization spreading like poison. I checked again, pulling out drawers, rifling through folders. Gone. Robert's coins. My mother's pearls. Every heirloom that carried the weight of our family's story gone. I called Daniel immediately. "The safe's been emptied," I said, my voice shaking not from fear but from fury. "Stay calm," he replied. "I'll arrange a private investigator. Pawnshops first. That's usually where desperation goes." By nightfall we were combing the city. Pawn shop to pawn shop, each owner shaking their head until the third. The man behind the counter pulled up footage from a corner camera. There they were. Ryan, my eldest son. Shoulders hunched, baseball cap pulled low. And beside him Jade, her red nails flashing as she slid the jewelry across the counter. Their smiles were forced, their movements jittery. On the timestamp the date glowed, 2 days before my birthday dinner. The footage showed them leaving with an envelope of cash. The clerk, pulling up the file, confirmed it. $2,000 in exchange for goods valued at over $40,000. I felt my chest tighten, not from grief, but from the bitter confirmation that the betrayal was complete. Not only did they want my home, my future, they had stolen the past, the tangible remnants of Robert, of my mother, of all the years I had preserved in velvet boxes and coin sleeves. And it wasn't just heirlooms. The investigator handed me another report. $90,000 in debts, credit cards maxed, quiet withdrawals siphoned from my accounts. Patterns of theft hiding under the guise of help with bills. I sat there in the pawn shop office, the fluorescent light buzzing above, and made my decision. "File theft charges," I told Daniel. My voice was steady. "I want them arrested. No more warnings. No more forgiveness." He nodded, sliding the paperwork toward me. "It will be done." Driving home that night, the city lights blurred in my eyes. I thought of Robert again, how proud he had been of Ryan, how he'd boasted at the factory that his boy would go far, how he'd pressed those coins into my hand the day before his surgery, whispering, "Keep them safe, Nora. They'll remind you of me." And now they were pawned for a spa weekend, traded for cash that dripped away in cocktails and hotel rooms. When I arrived home, I walked through the quiet house, touching each surface as if grounding myself. The walls seemed to lean closer, whispering that the line had finally been crossed. For years I had forgiven. I had excused. I had looked at Ryan and seen only the boy I once rocked to sleep, not the man Jade had molded into a thief. I had looked at Lucas and seen my quiet dreamer, not the dependent adult bleeding me dry. But tonight there was no room left for illusions. Love had not protected me. Forgiveness had not saved me. Only action would. So I stood in Robert's chair once more, the papers heavy in my lap, and whispered into the silence. They thought I was helpless. They thought wrong. Dawn arrived with fists on the door. The pounding was frantic, fists slamming against the wood in a rhythm that shook the frame. When I opened it, Jade stood there, hair disheveled, mascara smeared down her cheeks, her red nails chipped as if she had clawed her way out of a nightmare. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice cracking wild. "You can't press charges. Ryan didn't mean it. We'll return everything, I swear." Neighbors' curtains twitched, eyes peering from behind blinds. Jade's shrill pleas carried down the street like a siren. I didn't answer. I simply lifted my phone, pressed record, and let her unravel. Her words poured out, desperate, venomous, unhinged. When the patrol car rolled up minutes later, she swung toward it like a cornered animal. "Arrest her," she shouted, pointing at me. "She's crazy. She's ruining our lives." But it was Jade they handcuffed, charged with harassment, her cries echoing as they guided her into the back seat. The street fell quiet again, but the silence was not peace. It was the stillness of a storm about to break. By noon the storm arrived. Ryan was arrested at work. They called me hours later. The police had taken him from the office in front of his colleagues, his protests drowned by the rattle of handcuffs. When I saw him later in the holding cell, his composure was gone. His face was pale, streaked with sweat, his hands trembling. The arrogance Jade had built into him had crumbled, leaving only the frightened boy I once knew. "Mom," he sobbed the moment he saw me. "I didn't want this. I swear I didn't. Jade, she made me. She said if I didn't get the money, she'd leave me. She threatened me. I just borrowed it, Mom. I was going to return it." The words spilled like water from a broken pipe. He clung to the bars, eyes red, nose running. "I didn't mean to sell Dad's coins. I thought I could buy them back before you noticed. I thought I could fix it." I listened. I let every word sink in because I wanted to hear the truth, or at least his version of it. But when he finished, I shook my head. "Ryan," I said quietly, "you didn't borrow. You stole. And you didn't just steal from me. You stole from your father's memory, from your grandmother's legacy. You pawned your own family history for weekends at hotels." He collapsed onto the bench, face in his hands. "I'm sorry. Please drop the charges. Help me this once and I'll change. I'll get better. I'll do anything." My throat tightened, but my resolve didn't waver. "I've helped you every once for years. And every time it was the same promise. No more. You'll face this, Ryan. Not because I don't love you, but because love doesn't erase accountability." His sobs grew louder, echoing through the concrete walls. For a brief second I closed my eyes and saw him as a child again. The boy who cried when he scraped his knee, who clutched my hand on the first day of school. My heart ached with memory. But when I opened my eyes, I saw the man he had become. Grown in years, stunted in responsibility, wrapped in Jade's poison. And I knew I was doing the only thing left. Later that afternoon, Daniel told me Jade had disappeared after posting bail. She hadn't returned to Cedar Lane. Her car was missing. Rumors trickled in. Unpaid gambling debts, late-night threats, manipulation that stretched far beyond my house. By evening my phone rang again. The caller ID was unfamiliar. A woman's voice trembled on the other end. This is Jenna. I'm Jade's sister." She hesitated, then rushed out the words. "Please don't believe everything Jade tells you. She's sick. Gambling, lying, using people. She's threatened me too. You're not the first family she's destroyed. You won't be the last." Her voice cracked. "Ryan isn't innocent, I know. But he's under her thumb. He's been for years." I thanked her, though my chest felt heavier than before. Knowing Jade's poison had seeped into other families didn't lessen what had been done to mine. That night, I visited Ryan in the county jail. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting his face in sickly shadows. He clutched the bars when he saw me, his voice breaking. "Mom, please. Just help Jade. She doesn't deserve this." My stomach turned at the words. Even here, even after everything, he begged for her. I drew closer, my hand steady on my side of the bars. "Ryan, fix yourself first. If you can't save your own soul, you'll never save hers." His tears dripped onto his hands. "You're really leaving me here?" "Yes," I said. "Because for once, the lesson must cost you something. For once, you'll learn that betrayal has a price." He pressed his forehead to the bars, broken. I turned and walked away, the echo of my steps filling the corridor. Love still lived in me, it always would. But love without boundaries is not love at all. It is servitude. And I had served long enough. When I returned home, Robert's photograph greeted me from the mantel. His eyes, caught in that black and white frame, seemed both sad and proud. "I drew the line today," I whispered to him. Without guilt. Without hesitation. For the first time I felt the words were true. 6 months can feel like a lifetime or like a blink. For me it was both. The trial came in spring, when the dogwoods along Cedar Lane bloomed white and delicate, mocking the heaviness in my chest. Ryan sat in court with his head bowed, his suit wrinkled, his face hollowed by nights without rest. Jade was nowhere to be found. Her seat beside him stayed empty, as it had been since the day she vanished into the shadows of her own schemes. The judge's voice was steady, detached. 8 months in county jail. 3 years probation. Full restitution of the stolen property, to be repaid in installments. Ryan nodded, his lips trembling. He didn't look at me until the very end, when the gavel fell and the room emptied. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. His full of shame, mine full of something colder than anger. Resolution. Love was still there, but love without boundaries is poison. I turned away before his tears could pull me under again. Jade never resurfaced. Rumors whispered that she had fled to Nevada, dead snapping at her heels like wolves. Others claimed she'd moved in with another man, repeating the cycle she had perfected. It didn't matter. Whether she lived or vanished, she was already dead to me. And so began the quiet rebuilding of my life. The first step was practical. I hired Maria, a kind woman in her 50s, to come 3 afternoons a week. Not a caretaker, I didn't need one, but a companion. Someone to drink tea with, to walk the garden paths, to remind me that laughter could still live in my house. She was gentle but never pitying. With her I was not fragile. I was simply Nora. The second step was legal. Daniel and I sat at his desk once more, the heavy oak covered with papers. My will lay open, the ink still drying on revisions. To Ryan, I instructed. A modest sum. Enough for survival, not indulgence. The rest, properties, investments, liquid assets, goes to a foundation. For women like me. Women who carried their families on their backs only to be discarded when their hands trembled with age. Daniel nodded, his pen scratching across the page. "You're certain?" "Certain," I replied. "Let my sons inherit a lesson. Let strangers inherit the shelter I never had." The third step was personal. I pulled out my paints stored for years in the attic, their lids crusted but still usable. Canvas after canvas filled with landscapes, rolling hills, storm-tossed seas, a small white house with tulips in bloom. My fingers remembered what my heart had forgotten. Creation for no one but myself. By June I joined a book club at the library, the same library where I had worked extra shifts to pay Ryan's tuition decades ago. We sat in circles, women my age and younger, discussing novels that ranged from Russian tragedies to light-hearted mysteries. No one asked me for money. No one demanded sacrifice. They asked only for my thoughts. And I gave them freely. It was there, surrounded by paperback covers and whispered debates, that I realized I had found something I hadn't felt in years. Real friends. One evening, Maria placed a letter in my hand. "From Ryan," she said softly. The envelope bore his shaky handwriting. Inside, 5 pages of confession. He wrote of therapy, of group sessions in the jail, of nights when he lay awake replaying every moment he had traded loyalty for convenience. He didn't ask for money. He didn't beg for help. He simply wrote, "I take responsibility. I understand now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I will earn it if I can. I read it once, then again. My heart twisted, but not in the way it once had. There was no temptation to rush to his rescue, no urge to erase his pain. I folded the pages neatly, placed them in a drawer and whispered, "Good, that's where it starts." Months later I returned to Harbor and Hearth, alone this time. The manager greeted me warmly, his eyes lingering with something unspoken. "Mrs. Keene," he said, "I'll never forget that night. The way you sat there while they tried to strip your dignity, and the way you answered. You didn't bend. Most wouldn't have had the strength." I thanked him, my lips curving into something close to a smile. The same restaurant where humiliation had been served with salmon now served me liberation. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. The river outside shimmered under the evening sun, a mirror of renewal. Sitting there, I understood. The worst night of my life had become the foundation of my freedom. The humiliation had burned me down to ash. And from that ash I was building something new. A year passes quickly when you're finally living for yourself. 12 months ago, I was sitting in a courtroom, watching my eldest son confess to crimes against his own mother. I was clutching bank statements like weapons, fighting against lies that painted me as senile. I was trembling, but not from age, from fury. Now I sit in my garden, the sun warm on my shoulders, the soil soft beneath my hands as I plant late summer roses. My fingers ache sometimes, but the ache is mine, not forced by anyone else's demands. For the first time in decades, my work belongs only to me. Ryan was released 6 months ago. He didn't come here, didn't beg, didn't demand. Instead, he sent postcards from Colorado. Simple ones, mountains dusted with snow, rivers cutting through canyons. His messages are short. Thinking of you. Staying sober. Working steady hours. He signs them, "Your son, Ryan," as if reminding himself of the title. I don't respond. Not because I wish him harm, but because silence is my boundary now. If he wants a relationship, he must build it without leaning on me. And Jade? Nothing. No calls. No letters. No sightings. Her name is dust, erased from our family's story. I no longer waste thought on her. She was a wound that scabbed over into a scar. I have my own rhythm now. Mornings in the garden. Afternoons with books or paint. Evenings with Maria, who still comes by to share tea and laughter. I joined a small choir at the community center, though my voice is cracked with age. We sing hymns, and for once, the sound of my voice isn't drowned out. There are no more midnight phone calls about overdue bills. No more envelopes slipped under my door asking for loans. No more footsteps echoing down my hallway uninvited. I live in a house stripped of manipulation. Some nights, I take Robert's photograph from the mantel and speak to him quietly. I've learned, I tell him. I thought love meant sacrifice without end. I thought being a mother meant never saying no. But I was wrong. Dignity comes first. Even with children. The silence that follows is not empty. It's full of truth. The neighbors look at me differently now. Not with pity, not with whispered judgments, but with a kind of respect that comes only when someone refuses to be broken. They saw the patrol cars, the sheriff's visits, the gossip Jade tried to spin. They saw me stand alone against my own blood. And they saw me win. Freedom is not loud. It doesn't come with applause or fireworks. It comes quietly, in small moments. Making coffee in the morning and realizing no one will interrupt with a demand. Walking through my garden and knowing every bloom belongs to me. Falling asleep without wondering whose crisis tomorrow will bring. I don't look back anymore. I don't replay Ryan's pleas or Jade's manipulations. I don't calculate the money lost or the heirlooms stolen. I don't measure love in sacrifices. Because I finally understand, respect is not begged for. It is not bought with money or silence or endless giving. Respect is demanded. And I demand it now, every day I live without them. I am no longer the mother who trembles at her children's disapproval. I am no longer the woman who kept secrets to protect reputations that spat on mine. I am Nora Keene, 66 years old, owner of every brick and beam they once claimed. Not a victim of care. Not a fragile widow waiting for permission to exist. But a woman running her own life. What began as betrayal has become clarity. And clarity is freedom. The knock was gentle. Not the pounding of desperation. Not the fists of accusation. but a measured tap, 3 soft raps against the wood. I almost didn't answer. After a year of peace, I had learned to treat unexpected visitors as intrusions. But something about that knock was different. When I opened the door, I saw him. A young man, no more than 20. His hair was dark, his shoulders broad but tense. His eyes, my God, his eyes were Ryan's. The same blue that once looked up at me from a crib. The same blue that once begged me to let him stay out past curfew. He removed his cap and held it against his chest. "Mrs. Keene." His voice was steady, respectful. "Yes. My name's David. I'm your grandson." The world tilted. I stepped back, clutching the doorframe, as if the weight of those words could topple me. "Grandson," I whispered. Ryan never." He shook his head. "He didn't tell you." "He didn't tell me either. Not until recently." I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had signed eviction notices, where I had stacked deeds and receipts like weapons, where I had cried into the silence after years of betrayal. Now across from me sat a boy I didn't know I had, his hands folded carefully, his back straight with the posture of someone raised to show respect. He told me everything. His mother, Ryan's old girlfriend long before Jade, had raised him alone. She had never sought child support, never knocked on my door, never asked for help. She had given him a modest but honest life. David worked at a hardware store, studied part-time at community college, dreamed of becoming an engineer. "I found out about Ryan when I turned 18, he said quietly. "Mom finally told me. I didn't want to meet him at first, but I was curious, so I tracked him down and he admitted it. Said he wasn't proud of how things turned out. Said if I wanted to know real family, I should meet you." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "He told you to find me?" "Yes." David's voice softened. "He said you're the strongest person he knows. That I'd understand who I am if I knew you." For a moment I couldn't speak. Ryan, the son who had stolen from me, lied to me, begged for Jade even in handcuffs, had sent me this boy. His son. A living reminder that even in the ashes of betrayal, something unpoisoned could still grow. We talked for hours. About his classes, his job, the way he fixed old radios for fun, the way he saved every paycheck to pay tuition himself. He didn't ask me for money. He didn't hint at favors. He only asked questions about Robert, about the house, about the family history he had been denied. I showed him Robert's watch, the fountain pen, the photographs from decades past. His eyes lit with curiosity, not greed. When I offered him tea, he jumped up to help me with the cups. When I spoke, he listened without interruption. For the first time in years, I felt the presence of family without the sting of exploitation. At dusk, he stood to leave. "I don't want to intrude," he said politely. "I just wanted to meet you, to know where I come from. You don't owe me anything." I studied him, his careful manners, his quiet humility, the way his voice carried no trace of Jade's entitlement. "You're not intruding," I said softly. "You're the first knock on this door I've welcomed in a long time." He smiled then, and it was Ryan's smile, but purer, untouched by deceit. After he left, I sat in Robert's chair and let the evening settle around me. The house was quiet, the air heavy with memory. But for the first time I didn't feel alone. I thought of the irony. My sons had tried to strip me of dignity, to reduce me to an obstacle between them and money. Jade had tried to smear my name, to cast me as a confused old woman. Ryan had stolen my heirlooms, Lucas had drained my savings, and yet, through the cracks of all that betrayal, light had entered. David. A grandson I hadn't known. A chance not at redemption, because some betrayals cannot be undone, but at continuation without venom. I don't fool myself with fantasies. David is not salvation. He is not here to heal the wounds his father made. But he is proof that blood can flow without poison, that not every branch of a family tree rots. At 66, I no longer dream of reconciliation with Ryan or Lucas. I no longer imagine Jade apologizing. Those illusions are buried. But I do dream of sitting at this table with David again, telling him stories of Robert, showing him how to tend the garden, passing down lessons not in dollars but in dignity. Because in the end, what I want to leave behind is not money for parasites, but memory for those who deserve it. And so I choose to open my door. On my terms. To a future I decide. Betrayal took everything I thought I had. But clarity gave me something better. The knowledge that family is not defined by who drains you, but by who honors you. David knocked softly, respectfully, not demanding, not entitled. And I answered, because even after all I lost, I am not finished. I am not helpless. I am the one who chooses, always,